Hello and welcome to Console Shock, which was and still is a show where we talk about retro and modern gaming. I tried to do it a little bit of a Digital Foundry style there because Rich always says it, doesn't he, Stu? Like it was and still is. Actually, he's given up doing that.
Has he?
He's kind of just says a bit more of a straight up like intro now. I started watching the one from today, and I was hoping he would say it, and but he didn't, unfortunately. So, yeah, a bit disappointed.
End of an era.
I guess it gets a bit tedious, doesn't it? It gets a bit tedious saying the same stuff over and over again. We do it, so each time we drop an episode, but anyway, yeah. How you going?
Yeah, good, mate. Yeah, good. Well, pumped for the gaming.
Yeah, we need to. Obviously, you've got to do the Switch 2 YouTube grifter stuff now, haven't you? So you need to do. We need to first post a video. We need to post a video about Nintendo Switch's Twitch disaster. It's like the Wii U all over again. Switch 2 with a picture of you with an angry face holding the Switch 2. There's that one. You've got to do that one first, and then you've got to do Switch 2 after a week. And then Switch 2 after a month, and then 3 months. Is it still worth it? Then a year. We need to make sure we do all of these bits. You looking forward to doing all that, Stu?
Well, I am, but I'm a little bit annoyed actually. I'm a little bit annoyed, Trev. I'll be honest with you, because everyone is. I bought the Switch 2, got it on day one. Really pleased. I bought it, and I think it's really, really good. And
you can't get clicks if it's really good, Stu. You got to hate it for some reason. Well,
you just put that in there somewhere. Just say, "Oh, Stuart's mad."
Yeah,
I'm doing the picture.
You are, yeah.
Can you see me?
There you go. I'll cut that out. We'll cut that out. Yeah, with a picture of like an bad AI image of Mario crying or something.
Yeah,
you throwing the Switch like no. Yeah.
But no. Yeah. On a serious note. I think the Switch is sort of really good, and I'm really enjoying Mario Kart. And it's like, I mean, what I like about it's like the old Switch, but it's so much snappier. The graphics are so much better. It feels much better in the hands to use. And then a lot of people are making all these sort of complaints about it, saying, "Oh, it's a terrible launch lineup. Oh, there's no games that came out. Oh, hardly any games. There's only Mario Kart." And I'm thinking, are you mad? There's loads of games that come out for it, plus all of the upgrades to sort of previous games. And I think people are disappointed because when the Switch 1 came out, it came out with what's it, Breath of the Wild.
It didn't have an absolutely stunning launch lineup, really, did it? I mean, you had this crappy sort of 1-2 Switch Joy-Con game. You had Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a Wii U game. You had Mario Kart 8, which is a Wii U game. I mean, I know a lot of people didn't play
Mario Kart 8 was not a launch title, though. That was a couple of months later.
Was it a couple months later? But even so, it wasn't an original game. I mean, I know people not everybody played it because it was a Wii U game and that had a limited audience, but it certainly wasn't like, I mean, if you're looking at an amazing launch lineup for a console that's like, F me, that's amazing. It's actually hard to pin one down. You can't even say some of the all-time classic consoles like the PS2 didn't have a really.
That had a rubbish. That had loads of games. But none of them were like, oh yeah, this is really, really good. And I mean, but
the Dreamcast, I think, was pretty good. Certainly the PAL Dreamcast. We had there's about 20 games. There was tons of games out straight away. But yeah, it's the Switch 2. It's definitely not it's not one of the better ones, but it'd be hard pressed for you to say that you've got nothing. Mario Kart World would be more than enough for most people. I would say.
That's it. That's 100%. I'm just bringing up. You can really hear the keyboard. Switch 2 games. So, I mean, things like Cyberpunk, Yakuza 0, Hogwarts Legacy, Sonic Shadow Generations, Mario Kart World, what's a Hitman. I don't know, some Room Factory game. That's not really for me. Street Fighter 6. I think there you got sort of something for everything, something for everyone, really.
I mean, the argument.
Split Fiction.
Yeah, the argument a lot of people have been hammering against it is, well, this is stuff that has been released elsewhere. And the trouble is people fall into the trap, always with Nintendo consoles. If there's some kind of third-party game that comes out a year later or 2 years later, happened with the Switch, with like Witcher 3 and Doom and everything. People are like, well, these are games that have been out for ages. No one cares now. No one cares. Why are they doing this? But the trouble with the thing with the Nintendo audience is there's a huge chunk of that Nintendo audience that just play Nintendo. They don't have PS5, they don't have PC, don't have Xbox. They just play Nintendo. They wouldn't have played any of these games. They might not even. I mean, you'd probably be hard pressed to imagine them not having heard of your Cyberpunks and things like that. But there's certainly a huge proportion of Nintendo gamers that have never played these games because they don't own the other hardware. Got a mate of mine who just plays on Nintendo, has no other consoles, my age. So it's not a little kid that just gets Nintendo from their parents. So they'll be able to play Cyberpunk and, Split Fiction and things like that, like they're brand new. And, well, there was probably a slightly better argument with the Switch one that you can play those games portably, but you can't really say that for the Switch 2 because you've got the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, which you play, there's a PC version of those games. You've been able to play them handheld for a few years now, right? But yeah, people tend to assume that, everybody that's into games buys every console. So they've always had those third-party games have been available to them as soon as they came out. It's just not true with I think uniquely to Nintendo consoles, you're more likely to find people that just have that and don't have anything else. So, and you need why not have as many games as you can, even if they're older games, especially if they haven't appeared on the platform before. So yeah, don't put Split Fiction, put Cyberpunk. Those games weren't going to run on the Switch 1, so.
No, exactly. So I'd say I think it's got a really good lineup, and I've been really enjoying. I was actually a little bit like because on Mario Kart 8 I got all the extra tracks and all of that malarkey, and I actually got a little bit bored with it. I was like, I couldn't be bothered to sort of play through them, but and I thought, well, I'll get the pack with Mario Kart World, and I'm actually really, really enjoying it. It's a really good sort of version, and it's sort of very clever about all the wall riding you can do and going on the rails and sort of trying to sort of master the courses. And then I haven't done much of the open world stuff. That hasn't really sort of grabbed me, but I will do. I've done all the Grand Prix and the other bits and bobs, and I've done a little bit of online. But it's really good experience. I'm actually sort of sitting down and actually having fun with it. And I know I've talked about in the last year or so, I've done, actually, Trevor, I think I'm a PC gamer now. I do barely any gaming on my Series X, but I'm really enjoying sort of doing PC gaming. But now I'm actually I think I'm a PC gamer and a Switch 2 sort of gamer.
The side of Switch, yeah.
So
basically, what I've been doing for the last few years, really, with the Steam Deck, especially, and the PC,
exactly, and it's so good to sort of chill out, sort of in bed before you go to bed, and I'm playing a little bit of Switch 2, and then I'm still playing games on my PC, and I'm really enjoying that. But I think that. I think the Switch 2's an absolutely smashing game machine and or console. But I think, I can understand why people are annoyed about the price. But then someone sort of made sort of an issue because they're all saying, the Switch 1 couldn't play all these more powerful games. The Switch 1 couldn't do this. The Switch 1 couldn't do that. So they made the Switch 2 able to play, Cyberpunk and more AAA games, probably in a little bit of a cut down format, but it's still a great experience, and it's not really too sort of cut back. I think, though I haven't tried Cyberpunk, and I probably wouldn't have any interest in playing that on the Switch, to be fair. But I think I can understand why people get annoyed with the pricing of games, but I still think they have pretty good sales on the Switch store, and generally
just not on the first party games.
Yeah, well, every now and again they do, but
they knock a fiver off, don't they? Every now and then, yeah.
And they're not. They give it like
the one annoying thing. The main thing that they haven't done with the Switch One, they didn't really do anything. Was there was often always like a budget range.
The Platinum consoles. Or what they
basically Platinum
choice.
Select choice or whatever. We're going way back to like the Super Nintendo. I think it's probably when they started it. And they were doing that with the Wii U and with 3DS. They were like £20 first party games. You could get like Luigi's Mansion for £20, Mario Kart. But with the Switch One, they didn't do anything like that. I don't think there was any kind of a budget range. So basically Breath of the Wild, a 2017 game, Mario Odyssey, they basically stayed at like £50 perpetually, and they still are. So it's interesting that they absolutely seem to choose to not have a budget range, whereas Sony have kept their Platinum range going. I think Xbox have like an Xbox Hits or something, which they've had since the original Xbox. There's obviously sales that they do online. The Switch sales are pretty good with the third-party stuff. Like you say, Stu, you do get it's a little bit dishonest to say they never go on sale. The physical copies don't really go on sale unless you can catch an Amazon Lightning deal. That's not really Nintendo telling them to put something on sale, though, is it? But yeah, the online digital copies, they get a little occasional sale.
Occasional, but the point is that there is a certain charm with a Nintendo game, and I'll be honest with you, Trev. If people didn't buy them, if people didn't want to play them, if they weren't good, they'd go on sale. They would drop down. And you've got to realise that things like Mario Kart 8, it's still a brilliant game. Mario Odyssey, there's still so much sort of you can still pick that up today, and that would be your game of the year. And they're still really good. They're one of the only sort of publishers where pretty much everything they come out with is pretty much gold. And I think that's something they got to give them credit for, because they come out with these really good sort of products, and they're not just and I think sometimes when people they buy a game that's 40, 50 quid or whatever, and then they complete it in 9 hours, and then it's just on the shelf, or it's traded in, or if you downloaded it, it just stays in your library forever. And something the benefit of the games for Nintendo, like, well, you can buy it, and then once you do eventually complete it and get everything out of it that you wanted to, you can sell it for a pretty good price, and and sort of move on from there, really.
It's actually looking at the launch lineup and going back on previous consoles. Also the two big things, the things that people don't like about the Switch 2 is it isn't really, people don't see it as being very innovative. You could argue it was a different time, so it's not an apples to apples comparison, but the Super Nintendo was basically an upgraded NES. There wasn't really anything. You could probably argue the controllers was a little bit more advanced, a few more buttons, but I think everybody was sticking more buttons on the controllers at that point, so it wasn't anything mind-blowing. You could, like I said, not really an apples to apples comparison, because people probably weren't
Trev,
really looking for...
If you look at the iPhone 1, the iPhone 2, they hit the nail on the head, and it's just been small little changes every year to the product to make and if someone came out with a phone that was completely different and buttons were in different places and it did all fancy things, you'll be like, the Switch 1 was an absolute brilliant concept. Absolutely brilliant. They nailed everything. You know, it was great on the TV.
Well, it was the ultimate sort of realization of the Wii U, wasn't it? Really?
Put the kickstand out, you know, and you can play games there with your friends with the controllers. You know, it had absolutely everything. So what they've taken on that is improved it with more power, you know, a bigger screen, and you know, and it's funny because people are like, they're complaining it hasn't got an OLED. They're complaining about the battery panel, battery life, but then on the other hand, they're complaining about the price. So, you know, in reality, you've got to think that unfortunately, you know, things do go up in price, and I think it's, you know, potentially people who I don't know, have gone, actually, I don't want to get it yet because I haven't really got the money for it. And also, I'll say nasty things about it because, you know, I'll say, I'll wait for some more games to come out. In reality, you're probably waiting until you get that bonus from work, or it's your birthday, or it's something else, and then you'll pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, we also know, you know, we can sort of disregard the YouTube grifters that are just doing it for the clicks, but I mean, realistically, you were kind of one thing you were sort of explaining there as well was what were you expecting Nintendo to deliver? I mean, they've basically just had their biggest selling console of all time. The Switch One might even become the biggest selling console of all time. They can catch up to the PS2 unless the Sony executives can suddenly find another 10 million in a warehouse that they forgot about, which they seem to do every time Switch creeps closer to their PS2 figure. So, I mean, what are you going to do to keep that momentum going in terms of, you know, the huge success of the Switch? I mean, basically release a Super Switch. And I think that's what most people wanted. I'm not sure there's many. There's magic. There's always a magic gimmick that's out in the ether somewhere that someone will be able to drag into reality, and it will become the next big thing. But, you know, Xbox, PlayStation, they basically just iterate on the same slab of plastic with a, you know, hardware inside it that will play games.
Oh, exactly. Why was
the standards are different for them?
The PlayStation. Oh, that's not very innovative.
Yeah.
It's just the same box as you had before, but it's a slightly different shape, and it you know, plays at a slightly different resolution. You know, there's no innovativity. I can't even say it now. There's none of that in there. It's just the same. And I think I don't know what people wanted. I heard no good sort of suggestions of go, yeah, I know, but why didn't the Switch 2 have a projector so you could play it on the wall built in? Oh, wouldn't that been amazing? Oh, why didn't the Switch 2 have, you know, 4 controllers that slid on from different ways? You know, all people have got to say is, oh, it hasn't got an OLED. In 3 years, they'll sell an OLED version. Oh, I'm not going to buy it. Oh, an OLED version.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was never going to happen because that would have increased the... We talked about the price extensively when they announced it, and we were pretty much spot on with what we predicted. We didn't really see it being anything under 400 pounds. You know, certainly not 350. When we see the price of the consoles at the moment, which have actually gone up, and you look at things like a Steam Deck and things like that, it was never going to be £300, £350. And this is the price it's probably going to be forever now. Games consoles don't get cheaper. There'll probably be a Switch 2 Lite. I think you can guarantee that. That might be an echo. You know, they'll knock off 50 quid for that for a more limited version in terms of, you know, probably you won't be able to dock it. But that's fine. You know, I use a Switch Lite as my main Switch these days. It's just so convenient and they're so portable. So I think we'll see an OLED of the regular Switch that will probably become the default Switch 2. And then we'll have the Lite that will come in as a cheaper option that it will be a bit more limited, but will play the same games. But yeah, I mean, obviously you got the Switch. I was potentially going to pre-order one, but I just couldn't get, you know, a pre-order in on time. I was kind of hoping
they're available on Amazon now.
I've seen that, but I'm not itching to go and grab one particularly, and that's not because I don't think it's any good. Or I mean, there's an element where there's not really a game that I want to play. It seems most people, obviously, Mario Kart World. I do like the Mario Kart games, but they're not my absolute favourite game that I'm going to rush out and buy. And if I was going to get a Switch 2 today, it would be that Mario Kart World Pack, because obviously it just makes the cost of Mario Kart World far more reasonable than the £70 you've got to pay it in every other case. But it was weird because Nintendo were going to be doing those pre-orders, and it was about how much playtime you had on the Switch and things like that. But I didn't get an invite. I think I didn't. I didn't have my emails settings probably weren't what they wanted. I know there was something to do with that they wanted you to do. So it was a bit weird. So in the end, it's kind of passed me by a little bit, but in the next few months, I may well get one. To be honest, the thing that's most compelling to me is playing the Switch 1 games on it. Obviously, the performance.
I have. I played. I've installed, put in Ease 10 Nordics or whatever it is, because I was playing that previously on the Switch 1, and it was a little bit sort of stuttering and things like that. So, but what's it? MVG's done. One Vintage Gamer. He's done quite a few videos of playing old games, and some of them are and they've gone from 30 frames or 25 frames, things like the Batman games, up to well over a fixed 30 or a fixed 60 frames. So it's actually really improves the performance of them. So I'm actually sort of quite excited about that, to sort of give that a go. But one thing I did install or pay for was I upgraded my membership to the expansion pass, Nintendo.
Oh, that's the one I have. Yeah.
So now I can play the GameCube games on there. And there's only 3: Zelda, Wind Waker, F-Zero, and Soul Blade 3. So I downloaded that.
Soul Calibur 2.
Yeah, that's Soul Blade 3, though, isn't it?
You are correct, actually, because the original, or Soul Edge 3, you could call it.
Soul Edge 3 is a battle of...
God, it was a weird one, wasn't it? Because it was Soul Edge in the arcade, and there was a PS1 port, and they had to call it Soul Blade because someone had the rights to Edge. And then they just thought, sod it, we'll just call Soul Blade 2 Soul Calibur. And then it's got a bit confusing, but I think everyone just thinks of it as Soul Calibur now, of course.
Exactly. So I played a little bit of that, and I've actually quite enjoyed playing things like Mario World on the Super Nintendo.
So you've been playing emulator. Soul Blade 3, Soul Calibur 2. That's the full title. Yeah.
Yeah. Link's Revenge.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So I've been playing a lot of that on there, and actually it's
Wind Waker?
No. I've got that on my I've got the Wii U version on my Wii U, so if I were to play it, I would actually play that version, to be fair. But
the GameCube one is 4x3, and also the camera controls will be the other way round, because that's how they did them in those days. It'd be a bit janky. Yeah,
I think it would just be difficult to play. But yeah, the Nintendo store's really good as well. It's really sort of snappy, and it's quite good when you go in there. There's still obviously quite the good sales section. And
so then plenty of porno games.
Yeah, you can get all your hentai games,
Pop and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all on there. But loads of games actually say, not available. So they're obviously not compatible with the Switch 2. Or probably about 2%.
Oh, that's interesting.
Games. Yeah, so they won't let you buy it. They might use some
gadget or something that is part of the Switch 1 that maybe doesn't work on the Switch 2, perhaps, yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but I'm just...
You know, think about the PS2 VR. There's the same thing with the PS2 VR, because obviously it's so radically different. None of the PSVR 1 games work, and very few have had a port to the VR2, so there's a small selection that you can play. But, you can plug the PSVR 1 into the PS5 with an adapter, but it's just a fact to set that up with the camera and the PlayStation Move controls that I just thought, I'll just forget it. Too much. Obviously, there's a similar. There are going to be some games that, with the Switch 2, that obviously have similar issues because, there might be like Labo related, so therefore you can't really do that on the Switch 2 because that doesn't support Labo. Yeah, there'll be little edge cases, I suppose, where you'll see those. But it's good to know that it's obviously it was a bit of a slog, isn't it, to use on the Switch One? It's very laggy and jerky, and it's good to know they've actually made an effort to improve that experience on the Switch too.
The store is so much better now. And I haven't really tried the chat feature. I haven't tried using it as a mouse controller. I haven't played that. I actually, two things I don't like about this is the clickbait. Stuart hates the Switch 2 because, reason number one, that demo game, Nintendo Explore, whatever it's called. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Where it teaches you
£10 or whatever it is. Yeah.
I think it's £7.99 in pounds. Anyway, that that should have been a free demo to teach you how to use it. I thought that was a little bit cheeky. And then the second thing, I've got a Switch 1 Pro controller, and I synced it all up, and I was playing Mario Kart, having a whale of a time, and then I pressed the home button, and I put my console into sleep mode. And then an hour later, 2 hours later, the next day, whenever it was, I pressed the home button to turn on my Switch 2, and because I have a Switch 1 Pro controller, it doesn't turn on the Switch 2. I've actually got to get off the sofa.
You've got to pair it, though, haven't you? Did you not pair it with the Switch 2?
No, it's paired. So once you go and turn it on, once you turn the Switch 2 on, the controller works, but it won't turn on the bloody Switch 2.
Is that actually an issue that they say it is with the... Because when I found out the Pro Controller one worked with the Switch 2, I was like, that's great. Like, how often do you have to, certainly with the PlayStation... Actually, I think the DualShock 4s do work with the PS5, I think. But it's not, they don't really advertise that. But because those Switch 1 controllers, the Pro Controller is really good.
Exactly. It's a brilliant little controller. So I thought, I won't spend £70 on a Switch 2 Pro controller. I'll just use the Switch 1 one. And, and now I don't mind having to get up. Well, I do mind because I'm moaning about it. But having to get up and turn on the Switch 2, and then the controller will then... And I just think that's a little bit like, what do you do that for? What's the reason?
It's funny because one great thing that I'm doing at the moment is I use a dual sense with the Steam Deck when it's connected to my TV. And I'm playing it sort of docked. And the dual sense is perfect because it can wake the Steam Deck from sleep. So if it's just sat in your dock, you haven't played it in handheld, it'll wake it up, much like an Xbox controller wakes up an Xbox. The little trackpad area can work as a mouse, and it's perfect. It hasn't dropped off in terms of the connection or anything. It's a really good controller, and that's like two completely odd couple devices working in tandem. So it's funny that Nintendo have kind of made it difficult. They've almost still kudos to letting them use your old controller.
Exactly. So I don't know if it's some sort of technical limitation within it, and it says that, well, actually you can't use this because it's a different Bluetooth band or something like that. So it works once it's turned on, but it won't have enough power to turn it on. I don't know, but it'd be interesting if they do manage to work out a little patch for that. But I've got, you can probably see on my screen here. Where's my camera? There you go, up there. I've got this like silly controller which I bought for about 25 quid, which I use on my PC for gaming, and that actually works on the Switch. So I want to try and get the dongle out and see if I can get that going with it and see if that turns it on. And
People don't want to know about your dongle. Thank you very much.
And what I'm being turned on.
Exactly, yeah. It's horrendous. Thank God it's a podcast. That's all I can say. But I actually, most of the time I tend to use, when it comes to PCs, I tend to use an Xbox 360 controller because you have the dongle. There's a little wireless receiver you have to use because they aren't Bluetooth, and they're not just regular 2.4 gigahertz wireless. It's kind of got its own weird proprietary version, so you have to use the wireless receiver, but it works fine on a Steam Deck, on a PC, and I find the connection is a bit more reliable. Whereas when I've used actual Xbox One and probably maybe the Series ones are better with that. I haven't actually tried one, but certainly the Xbox One controllers using Bluetooth, the connection would drop off and they're just a bit janky, and sometimes the analog sticks wouldn't do the right input. So I always found it to be problematic with PCs.
My Xbox Series X controller, I've got two, but I actually used the black one, which I originally got with the console, and I linked that up with my PC, and it was the triggers were always sort of sticking.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh fuck, this is
a problem with that for sure.
Yeah, and I'm like, and the Xbox controllers always used to be like to me the best.
Yeah.
And it was always a little bit frustrating, like, oh god, they're meant to be the best controllers, and then all the other ones. And then I think I watched a Linus Tech Tips video about PC controllers. Oh, what's the best one to get? So I watched that, and then I got one for I don't know, maybe it was. I think I just said it was 25 quid. Maybe it was 35, and then it's got a silly pattern on, but doesn't really matter, and in reality, that's a really good little controller to have.
Yeah, I definitely don't sleep on like the Dual Sense. They work really well with PCs, and like I said, it can wake my Steam Deck.
I mean, I've got Dual Sense 4, so I've got two of those.
Yeah. I mean, I've used. I did try DualShock 4 on my Steam Deck, and that worked great as well. So basically, the Sony controllers have been better than the Microsoft ones, apart from the Xbox 360. But you might find you need that wireless receiver for the 360 controllers, which might be a bit of a deal breaker for a lot of people.
But I've got What did I? Yeah, because I bought a little Bluetooth adapter. That's what I use. I bought a little $9.99 Bluetooth adapter, put it into the back of my PC, and then that connects to whatever controller, the Xbox One, and everything like that works really well. So it did come with a dongle, but the dongle's not even plugged into because I've got the keyboard and other things connected to that Bluetooth, and I don't seem to have any problems with that. But what was the other big news this week, Trev, or last week?
Actually, just one final thing that you reminded me of. I've even used. I've got a bunch of DualShock 3s from the good old triple days. They work great on PCs as well, because obviously they were always Bluetooth. They work great with PCs. Obviously, you have to be careful with the batteries in those if they're very old now. Well, the newest ones will be pushing 10 years now as well. And they're not easy to switch the batteries out of, because you got to open up the whole thing. Oh, that'll be true of a DualShock 4, and the DualSense as well will ultimately be like that. But
I did when we were on lockdown. I bought a PS3 battery, and I got it, and I think I spent a morning, about an hour, opening up the controller, watching a video, and putting the new battery.
Yes, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. It's a bit.
I could do it. Yeah. And I'm not great with that type of stuff. But I think I had there was all scratches on my controller now where I was trying to sort of unclip it. So I probably, you got off the value of the controller, but I thought, well, I'm never going to sell it. It'll just... Yeah,
you got to be careful with, obviously, there could be stripped screws and all that sort of stuff. I've always preferred, a controller that has AA batteries, because you obviously, you're not going to have a battery that will just stay in there forever, that will die someday. Then you've got to do surgery to fix it. Obviously, most people, I think, prefer just a built-in battery despite that. But, anyway, the other news is basically Microsoft... Well, the way it's been marketed is as a quote-unquote Xbox handheld, the Xbox ROG Ally X. And essentially it's a ROG Ally, or ROG Ally as we like to call them, that has a custom version of Windows that's tailored to gaming and is trying to make it a bit like Steam OS. And that's kind of it. It's still a ROG Ally. It's got an Xbox button. And it's also a lot different design, where it's actually got controller handles on the unit itself, which a lot of people think look a bit silly. Kind of reminds me of that GameCube keyboard controller in a weird way, like that giant keyboard that had GameCube controls on the ends. Obviously, there's a screen in the middle of this thing. But yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I'll probably say about it, and we'll get your thoughts on it, Stu. I mean, it probably is something that's actually right up my street. As you know, I love handhelds. I really love, obviously that includes the Switch, but PC handheld gaming has exploded. So we're really in kind of a golden age now of handhelds that we haven't seen since like the 90s, really, when we had kind of a handheld war then. A big handheld war there, and obviously you had like the PSP, the DS and things since then, but right now we're absolutely getting bombarded with these really cool handhelds. My personal preference is still the Steam Deck, mainly because of Steam OS makes it a lot easier to manage and run games and deal with, some of the annoyances of PC gaming, and not having to deal with Windows just to launch a game. It's far easier to manage your library of games and jump in and out of games, and even little things like sleeping the console. You just, you play any game, don't want to play anymore, you hit the power button, put it to one side, it shuts itself down into a deep sleep mode. When you're ready again, you come back to it later on, hit the power button, bang, you're right back where you were, just like you were back in the day with a PSP or a Vita or a DS. It behaves exactly the same way. The Windows handhelds, haven't quite got that particular function. It's kind of an underrated function, really, the sleep and wake, because it relies on the Windows way of doing it, which is really more for laptops. You're doing your Word document, you close that down when you're done, or you're browsing the internet, and you just shut your laptop. Go away, come back later, open it up, and you're back at your desktop again. Doesn't really work with games very well. Try doing that with a game running. You're playing, like, Fortnite or FIFA or, Doom, the Dark Ages. You pause it, close the lid on your laptop, come back, and the game's probably crashed from the way it suspends Windows. So that's been a bit of a deal breaker with those Windows handhelds for me. The confusing thing about it is I think a lot of people seem to think it's actually an Xbox because it's so heavily marketed as it's an Xbox when it's just a Windows PC. People aren't going to be able to go and buy an Xbox game on the Xbox marketplace on their Series S, and then it'll be available on their Xbox ROG Ally. There are games that have the Play Anywhere ability where your save will work across the Xbox and the PC version of a game, but that is if that game supports Play Anywhere. If it doesn't, you're just going to end up having to buy another copy of that game and starting that game again on the PC. And also there are games where you can buy the Xbox version and it will grant you access to the PC version, but the save won't work across both games. So again, you're kind of having to play the game twice. So there's a bit of confusion, I think, with the general public who perhaps aren't as savvy with this stuff, thinking it is just an Xbox. And no, you're playing the PC versions of those games, which may or may not either allow you to have another the Windows copy of the game along with the Xbox one you've already bought. They may or may not allow to do that, or may or may not copy your save across, even if it does. So there's some things that, probably won't be clear to people with that. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on it, Stu?
Well, I mean, when I saw it, I thought it looked, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think it looks cool.
I think the price is going to be around the $800-900.
It's going to be pricey. That's going to surprise people. I think they're going to be disappointed with the price.
It's going to be pricey. But then what I took from that is this is the first iteration of this machine, and then from my point of view, I'm like, well, okay, I saw this as not an announcement for this ROG Ally X machine, Xbox machine. It's more actually about the actual software that runs it. So then,
absolutely, yeah.
Actually, if you sort of think about it, it's going, well, actually, my PC here in where I'm doing this from, and I'm sort of going to almost say something and then prove as I'm doing it that it's not right. But this PC, 99% of the use of it is just for gaming. So if there was a gaming version of Windows, which, use less resources, so then put more resources into actually running the game, so the game performed better, so you could sort of turn it on, and then much like Steam, go into Steam desktop mode or whatever. And that for me is something that I would actually sort of sign up for. I'd go, okay, well, I'll turn Windows 11 into Windows X gaming mode or whatever, and then my games will hopefully run 10% better, and then all of these low-powered units would, the portable, the little, and I love those little computers, that are the size of sort of a Mac Mini or something, and if they all had, this gaming mode on them and some sort of internal integrated sort of iGPU, integrated graphics processor, then I think that is really how Microsoft can sort of take over the gaming sort of world, and people go, well, actually, yeah, I can do Xbox style gaming with a £300 desktop computer, or I can put this onto my main computer, or then there'll be lots more handhelds coming out, and then I think it's almost like the best of both worlds, because you have this gaming handheld, and then you can access your Switch library on there, and then all of your Switch games will work. They won't be like the Steam Deck games that you've downloaded off Steam. They'll all work because you're in the Windows environment, so everything will work. It won't have to go through an emulation layer, Proton. Yeah. So then it's actually going to be a much better proposition than using the Steam Deck. So potentially, when ASUS, Acer, or Microsoft make their own one, or who make Lenovo, Lenovo, Dell, everyone starts making more and more of these handheld consoles, and then they'll all have this sort of Microsoft operating system. They'll all come with 3 months of Game Pass membership, and you have loads of games on there already. Then you can just go to the Steam tab, go to the Epic Games tab, and then all the games you've bought over the last 10, 15 years are all going to be there. They all run on Windows. I actually think it's a really sort of smart move by Microsoft. So I actually think that the actual that software will like become the console, and it'll be more like an operating system, and there'll be people that come out with here's a Microsoft Xbox, console that's £400. Here's a console that's £700. Here's one that's £300, and it'll just be, that'll sort of take over actually having dedicated sort of gaming boxes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the most interesting thing about it, I mean, the handheld itself is the other elements to it, like the design, like the handles that are on it. It looks like it's going to be, performance-wise, it is another jump over the ROG Ally X, which is kind of the top spec ROG Ally up until now. So it'll be interesting what performance you'll get just in that sense. But yeah, the software is easily the most interesting thing. We really want to see what that gamer-optimized version of Windows will be like. Is it going to be like the Steam Deck? How is it going to handle driver updates and all those horrendous, absolute bundle of updates that you get hit with every now and then that can take sometimes an hour or two to download and then install? Is it going to handle those in a much more elegant way, like SteamOS handles its updates? Like you say, we're going to get some performance back, as well as a lot of those processes that run in the background in the regular Windows are going to be shut down. So you'll get a bit more performance. Will that mean the performance will genuinely see better performance with a game running in the Windows game mode versus running it off the desktop mode? Will that mean that Windows, when it's in gamer mode, will actually run games better than Proton? Because at the moment it seems like games run at worst on Proton about the same as Windows, and many times it actually runs a bit better, and that's with Proton running in the background, as the translation layer. So does this mean, with all of this paired back processes, that we'll see a big jump in games performing on Windows? That would be very interesting. And also shader compilation, will there be anything that will help with that? How easy will it be to launch a game from another store? Because obviously it's still going to support that. Will you have to dig out the mouse and the keyboard to get past the launcher, or will it be kind of will that pain be eased a little bit with what they kind of do with the Steam Deck, where you've got the trackpad there, and it still kind of tries to make it a sort of a bit easier for you to sort of jump through those hoops that a game might throw at you. What is that going to look like? The sleep and the wake issue that I mentioned already with Windows, is that going to be better in the gamer mode? Is it going to be more like how the Steam Deck handles it?
Because I think there's a lot of sort of situations where games from the last 2-3 years will all work very well, and but I think in the first year it's going to be a clusterfuck of problems, and you can see people going around with like a little portable keyboard and touchpad, and they're going, okay, well, I've got to put this game on, or it's going to be a bit of a pain. And actually, you might need things like that. I think it'll soon sort of iron itself out, unless you want to go and start to use things like DOSBox on there, or games from 8-9 years ago where they're not optimized for that. It will be a challenge, as you probably well know from playing old Steam games on a ROG Ally or something like that, where it starts bringing up mouse commands and those menus where you click on them and you've got to go down and pick things and stuff like that. It is going to be sort of tricky, but hopefully this is the start of sort of something that's going to make gaming sort of a lot more sort of accessible to people, and I think if they really play their cards right with this, it will become something really good to, and I know we've talked about it before, but PC gaming is really the most, once you bought into the ecosystem, bought a computer, it is really sort of the cheapest way to game.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I'd be surprised if it's as elegant as SteamOS. I hope it is, but knowing what the Xbox app and it is like on PC, having both of us used it, it's pretty janky. Sometimes you'll try and launch a game and nothing will happen. We'll launch it in the Xbox app, nothing will happen. And it turned out it was just updating itself, but it doesn't tell you that it's updating itself. It doesn't put icons for the games on your desktop, even if you tell it to, and sometimes they then disappear the next time you boot. You launch a game and nothing happens, and then you check the Xbox app, which has minimized itself, but it turns out no, it's had to download an update for the game. It's very, very, there's a lot of bumpiness and static that you have to deal with just with that Xbox app on the PC. So hopefully they're going to make that a lot more, streamlined and easier to use. Obviously with SteamOS as the blueprint, where you don't really have any of those issues at all. And how tempted are they going to be to still have stupid like Copilot AI crap coming up and advertising and if it could be anything like maybe the tiles that you have on the Xbox 360 dashboard, which still I think is better than what we got on the Xbox One and the Series. If it's anything like that, it'll be a pretty good experience. And also things like off the cuff stuff, like I use RPCS3 and loads of emulators and RetroArch. How well will that integrate into this gaming version? Would it be like no to play to have anything that uses like a windowing
that's a big
setup thing? You've got to go to the desktop, or will it integrate it into the gaming OS like SteamOS does with those apps? How there's a lot.
Unfortunately, it's got to be something for everyone, because when they release or because it's got to be work brilliantly on a handheld console. Then it's got to, if you think about it, and if it's going to be on PCs as well, and be on desktop, not desktop PCs, but under the TV boxes as well, it's got to play very similar to a sort of a Steam Deck in that manner. And then, but then if you're at a desk and you go, actually, I want the gaming way of playing. The gaming mode or whatever, but you think about it, then you've actually got to have, you want a mouse and keyboard, so then you'll still be using it like you would be using your PC now, but just have more access to the resources and have everything in sort of one place, and I think, I just know it's going to be. Even if they release it as that, it will be years of pain to get it all working as people want it to work.
Yeah, obviously this is the first evolution of it that we're about to see, so it'd be interesting to see how good it is straight off the bat. I'll be interested in. I don't have a Windows handheld anymore. There are moments when I do think, it'd be great to be able to jump back in on Game Pass again, but the amount of jank that I had to deal with to get to that made it kind of worth me just getting rid of them. But I'd be tempted if it turns out this is a if it's anything like SteamOS and it works as well and is as easy to use and as elegant as SteamOS, but with Game Pass. That's a game changer, really, and I would be interested in grabbing something like that, even over a Switch 2, to be honest. Price is obviously going to be a big issue. I mean, we've already touched upon there's people that, potentially think this is just an Xbox and isn't actually a Windows PC.
It's a Windows PC. You can't play your Xbox games on there.
Yeah, so the people that don't really understand that and are expecting literally a console, they're probably going to think it's going to be about 500, 600 quid at most, but it's probably going to be more likely 800. I mean, with the current ROG Ally X, I think is £800. I think. So it's going to be it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be cheaper. This is an upgrade from that, so it's going to be cheaper, maybe even costing more. And £800, people Sony are asking for that for a PS5 Pro, and people don't want to pay it. So, you could always, a handheld is always a better value proposition than a pro version of a console, because you're paying more, but it's easy to justify it because, it's a handheld. You've got a screen in it, you've got all this miniaturization going on. So it's a little bit of an easier thing to the price makes more sense than a PS5 Pro might when you're just paying for nicer ray tracing. It's still a box that sits under your TV. So, the price, I can't see it for anything less than £800. Maybe they'll surprise us. But, like you said, perhaps this will start a bit of an arms race and Lenovo will come out with a similar handheld. There is an interesting thing where there's like a lower spec version of this. Isn't there? There's like we mentioned the X, and then there's like an S version of this ROG Ally, but the hardware inside it is basically a Steam Deck level, which now is 3-year-old handheld that's struggling with modern AAA games, and there's also they're marketing even the X version of this. They're sort of saying that's great for 1080p gaming, but don't think you're going to be running on that handheld, chipset that's in there, which is obviously very impressive. I'm not trying to say it isn't, but games like Space Marine 2, which you can barely run on the Steam Deck, at sub 30 frames a second, Oblivion remastered is a bit of a nightmare on even a high-end PC. You're probably going to be running these games at 720p and then using DLSS to upscale them to the 1080p. So things are going to probably look a bit soft on that screen. So performance of modern AAA, PS5 era games is going to be interesting. Those games, you can run them on the ROG Ally X. They do run better than a Steam Deck, but it'll be interesting to see how that combined with the better hardware in this new handheld, combined with supposedly a cut-down version of Windows that will squeeze a bit more performance. It'll be interesting to see if you can run any of these, PS5 grade games Doom: The Dark Ages, is one that would struggle now as well. If they'll run it anything like, a Series S is probably the baseline, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah.
And they might the ASUS ROG Ally, Xbox ROG Ally might be able to get you a pretty decent current gen performance. But yeah, it won't be 1080p. It'll be 720 upscaled to 1080, which is fine on a small handheld screen. I'm not knocking that. That's probably what they mean by it would be perfectly adequate for 1080p. The lower spec one, I think you can forget about. Really, I think it's really even worth. Obviously, Microsoft probably insisted that they have one. To say, well, if they can't afford the more expensive one, well, at least we're giving them another option. But that's better than the Steam Deck.
Those actual machines, I'm probably not too. I'm certainly not going to buy one. But what I'm so excited about is what it leads to. And, where we'll be in 18 months' time when there'll be lots of these consoles out using this operating system to get access to that. That's actually what I'm excited about, and sort of seeing where this goes. But the actual, we obviously talked about it in this episode, but I've got a gaming PC which I'm very happy with. I've got my Switch 2, which I'm really enjoying, and I've got a Steam Deck, and I'll be honest with you, Steam Deck's not really getting used much at the moment. And once I probably clocked everything on Mario World and Mario Kart World, then I might go back to my sort of Steam Deck and sort of play a few games on that. But in reality, I can't see myself getting one any time soon. But I love the idea of them and where it's leading. Way people gaming, because what I've sort of found is sort of quite funny at the moment is when games come out, you're like, okay, well, what shall I get it on? Will it come out on Game Pass? Oh, will it be on Steam? Oh, it's a better price on Epic Game Store. Actually, do I want to get a Nintendo game? And it's a bit like that, because you're going, if I buy it on Steam, then I can use it on my PC and on my Steam Deck. But then, if it comes out on Game Pass, then I can just use it on my computer. But then then I can't play it portably. Well, that's a bit of a pain, isn't it? And it's always this. So I always want something where I don't have to make a decision. So I can just go, oh, it's on Game Pass, brilliant. I can play it on my handheld, or on that, or on one of the two machines. You haven't really got to have this sort of constant sort of battle between. Well, actually, it's free on Game Pass, but then I can't play it on my Steam Deck, and it's always a bit of a.
You're kind of having a Windows handheld really solves that issue for you. Well, the current versions of them, you can already do that, but you're battling using Windows with a joystick, on a handheld. Whereas this new option could completely transform how we game on PCs, which is, you can install SteamOS on a PC now, not necessarily has to be a Steam Deck. But you're limited. You are limited to a. It's a very big library that works on Proton, but a lot of Game Pass stuff that doesn't work. Like EAFC, of course, doesn't work, which is a game we both will like to play. That'll obviously work on that works on Windows, and it'll be great if we can. Yeah, like I said, it's difficult to justify buying games on anything that isn't a Windows PC or anything that isn't a PC generally. You can stay within SteamOS and have a handheld and like a desktop as well. But it's just if you get something on a Switch, it's kind of stuck on the Switch forever. Whereas you're paying more as well. Especially when we're talking about mainly third-party games here. Whereas I'll buy Cyberpunk on Steam. I can play it on my desktop, whenever I want to. Certainly if I've bought it I've bought it from the Steam store, I know the save will be up in the cloud for free. I've got to buy a special membership to have that ability. And then when I'm on the sofa in front of the TV, girlfriend's watching Real Housewives, I can just get the Steam Deck out or the ROG Ally X or whatever handheld, log into my Steam account, play Cyberpunk on that. It's the same save. So it really is the ideal way to game, I think. Obviously, Switch is always good for the Nintendo first-party stuff, but yeah, it's really it's exciting. I mean, supposedly they're still going to make an actual Xbox handheld. That's going to be interesting. I mean, for me, it seems like a better thing to heavily pursue this gaming-optimized version of Windows, and have the other generation of Xbox games run on that through an emulator or something, and the series games run through an emulator. I mean, like a handheld obviously would really be able to emulate a Series X or a Series S without. Well, there's different ways you can run those games. You can use translation layers. They can be flat out emulators. You would need to have for Windows to completely take over from Xbox and be Xbox. You would have to come up with solutions to be able to run your digital Xbox library going back to the original on an Xbox, Microsoft Windows. Maybe they're working on that, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see in like 2 years' time. I'm really looking forward to before we get that far, when this ROG Ally X, the Xbox ROG Ally X comes out. I think Christmas is when they said, or fall is when they say it's coming out. They didn't give it a precise date. Looking forward to those Digital Foundry videos where they're showing, SteamOS performance of a game, Cyberpunk or something, versus Windows gaming mode performance, to see if there's going to be a big jump. And also just seeing what that experience is like. I'm sure Linus and all those guys will throw, all kinds of scenarios at that gaming optimized version of Windows to see how it holds up and how it compares to SteamOS. So yeah, certainly a device I'll be interested in actually getting. And it seems like the ROG Ally is kind of the best Windows handheld at the moment as well. If you're going to go for a Windows gaming handheld, that's the one to go for. So another version of that is always good. I know people were a bit dubious about ASUS and their customer service when you have issues, but yes, I think you're always going to have problems when something breaks down. It's never going to be super smooth running. But yeah, well, I think that's all we've got for today, Stu. Where can you find us?
We're everywhere. We're Console Shock, on our own website. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. And pretty much any podcast client, you can find us.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Stu, and thanks everybody as always for listening. We hope you found it interesting. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take it easy. Bye bye.